There. Trevor from OrbitSling here. Just wanted to jump right in, talk about the top 7 questions I get asked every day about cold email outreach. Here at OrbitSling, we build growth systems for all sorts of businesses. And yeah, this is your chance to have those questions cleared up. So without any further ado, let's jump into it. Does it work? Is usually the first question we get. And the answer to that is yes. So moving on. No, but let's dive into a little bit more. If you can answer yes to a few questions, that's usually the place to start. The main one being, do your customers have an email address? If that's yes, then can you pitch something that they need to be on a meeting for? That also, if that's yes, then usually that's the best use of this. If you want them to buy directly, generally speaking, with cold email, we can't be blasting out links. And so usually if they need to go to a link or something, that's a no-go. But yeah, I guess if we wanted to dive a bit deeper into this question and give a more practical answer, we could go with, who does it usually work for? B2B companies, especially B2B service companies, very good for this because there's a meeting involved, and the whole idea here is to book some sort of meeting to chat more. B2B SaaS companies is also a good niche for it. Sometimes there's more of a meeting required. Sometimes it's a lot more like, let's chat a little bit, get you signed up. B2C can work, depends a lot more. There's a lot more nuance there. But essentially, just if it's something that solves a problem for a particular subset of your customers that we can reach using email, then that's the best way forward. But yeah, broadly speaking, I'd say most of it is going to be B2B of some kind, usually service, SaaS, or sometimes product companies that are B2B can work as well. So that's the short version of the answer there. How does it work is the natural way we're getting led into. Generally speaking, the rule to know is that you cannot send hundreds of emails from one inbox at your Google Workspace from your business and expect to not be marked as spam. Once you're marked as spam, your domain is usually flagged as spam, and then you've got problems with the deliverability of your regular day-to-day business operations emails, and that's not something we want. So usually the way this works is we're going to be splitting up the activity here across multiple inboxes, across also multiple domains. So, we'll have, 3 domains, for example, with 3 inboxes apiece, with different variations of your name, and these domains as well are slightly, they should be adjacent to your regular one. Usually .coms is what we work with. So for example, we run orbitsling.com, but when we do cold email for ourselves, we've got a bunch of domains, but it's things like getorbitsling.com, helloorbitsling.com, etc. So that gives you an idea of that. And then there's some platforms involved, which we can talk with at the end, but essentially the technology stack is we're going to be taking email copy that's very personalized to individual leads, and then to each of those leads, we're going to send a personalized version of a message that has some sort of offer in it, and usually a call to action to booking in a meeting. And then we slowly simulate real human activity on a bunch of email accounts to make it look like real regular activity. And then from there, we bring it all into one inbox where we can manage it and we can book people in. That's the TLDR on that. What are good numbers? This is a very common question we get. And here are some examples. So we'll start here with open rate. We don't really track this. For deliverability reasons mainly, we send most of our emails, especially the first one, as plain text. And so we just find it's best practice not to track that because we want to make sure that we land in the inbox. And I should preface all of these numbers here by saying this is assuming that your emails are landing in the inbox. We have ways of checking this. We have ways where we're going to be monitoring for this all the time. And basically, assuming that you're landing in the inbox, these are good reply rates. So the reply rate is just people replying. If you're less than a 1%, we know that's not very good. We would expect better. Something's wrong with the messaging, whether that's the copywriting, who we're going after, and what we're offering them, or something else is wrong. Essentially, that's where our problem lies, and we want to fix it. 2 to 3.5% is generally considered good, and especially for your sort of day-to-day campaigns, the ones that we're able to scale up. this is where we have a good reply rate. Sometimes you can get higher than that, 3.6 and above, but usually these are for shorter campaigns where there's a specific objective that is incentivizing people to respond. For example, off the top of my head, let's say you've got a conference coming up and we're sending emails to other attendees of those conferences trying to set up a coffee. Those usually get really good replies. And if you have a conference coming up, reach out, let's set this up for you. Positive reply rate is the next thing. So with positive replies, with reply rate, we're including everybody in here that responds well, negatively, neutrally, and then even like out of office gets included here. And so with positive replies, we want somewhere between 15 and 30%. More is better, obviously, but this is generally what you'll see. Depends a lot on your ICP, meaning your ideal customers that we're targeting, who we're sending emails to, and how many emails they get. If you're in an industry that gets slammed with cold emails, this will probably be lower because people are naturally less likely to respond. But if we're targeting an industry where people don't really get that many emails cold, then this can be higher. And then that combines with, is your offer really good and is it really solving a problem for them? Next up, meeting booking rate. Not everybody who responds well will book a meeting. Usually we're aiming to get this between 40 and 50%. And then of those, of course, the whole goal of this is how many numbers, how many units do we have to put into sent emails here in order to get, a meeting booked. So, if you have to send 1,000 for one, then if you send 5,000, can you get 5? Usually that is the case. I would say, just kind of talking broadly about numbers, email as a source of leads is usually more scalable than a lot of your other sources. But a lot can still depend on your copy, validating that offer, making sure that you're offering something people want, etc. So that kind of leads us into the is it legal side. We've got a humorous Star Wars quote here. Obligatory advice here. We won't go deep into this, but not a lawyer. Get legal advice if you really want the answer to this question. The super short version would be most jurisdictions around the world at the moment have some sort of anti-spam law in place, which just says if somebody hasn't opted in, then you shouldn't email them. In practice, this is, if we zoom out to first principles, this is where the reason for these laws existing is not because people were a bit annoyed at work. The reason for these laws is a lot more of people in certain communities, let's say, for example, like older people, were more at risk of losing money by getting scammed. I think we've all heard the story of the Nigerian prince that needs to move diamonds from here to here, and they can only do it by if you wire them from Western Unions. You get the idea. What we're doing is very different from this. There's also apparently a bit of a legal argument that since most of the emails that we're going to be sourcing online come from a LinkedIn profile, there's a little bit of consent implied with LinkedIn profile, but not a lawyer, not going to get anywhere from there. Super short version is we've never had anybody get flagged for this. And generally speaking, we don't really have any majorly negative replies in general on this. Usually people just say, no thanks. And we're also, I guess, keeping in mind here when we're talking numbers back here, we're not sending like 400 emails to somebody. We're sending usually 1, 2, and then maybe 2 or 3 more maximum. And we're not sending this every like 5 minutes following up. It's very natural. We end up in a place where we're offering something people want. Sometimes it takes a minute to get back to us. We have a chance to slip in a little more social proof or convince them further in some other way. But then at the end there, we back off and say, like, look, we're not going to spam you. Don't worry about it. What should I expect? This is, if we're launching a cold email campaign, generally speaking, there's going to be a 3-week period, which is warm up, the offer creation, lead sourcing, qualification, enrichment. We'll work together through a lot of this and then launch. And then there's a validation period. So in the validation period, we have live campaigns sending emails to multiple people all across your ideal customer profiles that we've created and the lists we've built essentially. And we're just validating if there's a good fit for, if we're getting a good reaction, essentially. And if we're not, then we'll go back to the drawing board and figure out why we're not and try and come up with a new angle. This is probably 75% copywriting at the end of the day, and that's what's important. But then from there, once we've validated an offer and we've got something that works and that we're booking meetings from it, that's where we move up into the scale up period. And that's kind of what I mentioned earlier, where it's like if I can send 1,000 emails to get a meeting booked, or maybe less, then can I send 5,000 and get 5 meetings booked? Usually the answer to that is some form of yes, unless you just got really lucky or unlucky, depending on how you look at it. And so then what do we need to do that? We just need to scale up the number of inboxes and the number of emails that we are able to send until we've hit that total addressable market. I won't go deep on this one. A lot of people ask about email newsletters. What's the difference really? It comes down to these are personalized, and maybe they're not literally personalized, so I put they're perceived as very personalized. The whole idea of these emails is that it doesn't look like I sent it to 1,000 people. It's not a big HTML fancy page talking about our blog articles that we've recently written or YouTube videos we've published. It's more about, it looks like I picked up my phone on the toilet and saw their LinkedIn and just had to reach out. That's the kind of like personalization level we're talking about here. And then, yeah, just jumping into the last bit here before I jump onto a call here in a moment. What platforms are we using? So there's lots of different platforms. There's Instantly, there's Smartly, there's lots of other ones for sending. The tool is less important than the strategy behind it. And that goes for the individual tactics as well. Like you might have heard certain subject lines do really well. Well, that's the case until everybody starts doing it. So, as part of this, we're always moving and testing. But broadly speaking, we generally use Instantly. We just find at the moment they've got the best features, and for the price, we can't beat it. So we use them for warm-up. We use their Unibox. We use their API to do lots of different things and to integrate them with your systems. For sending, we generally use Google mailboxes. We just find at the moment they're getting marked less as spam than any other ones. We've experimented a little bit with doing provider matching and just found, meaning like if if somebody's got a Google Workspace account, we'll send from Google Workspace. If somebody's got an Outlook, we'll send from an Outlook. We found that didn't really seem to have an effect on things, so we don't bother with it anymore. For calendar bookings, we integrate with whatever you're using usually. We use AI as well sometimes to try and book these in if there's a little bit of we're looking to optimize for speed to lead here. The idea being that if you can get back to somebody in 5 minutes, you're way more likely to have a real conversation with them. And so we do it that way. For sourcing leads, we use Apollo, LinkedIn Sales Navigator, and all of its derivatives. There's a ton of platforms pulling that data, as well as Clay, which most of you should have heard of. That's a full enrichment system. And then, for the enrichment part, we do sometimes use Clay, depends on what we're looking for. Otherwise, we build out custom enrichments. And by enrichments, we generally just mean there's the basic stuff, like we have to validate all the emails. But there's a lot more complex stuff, like we need to, once we've finalized the copywriting, what little bits of research do we need? And how do we take that research and write it into our emails in a way that is very human, very casual, and clearly not AI, because nobody wants to get a bunch of AI slop in their inbox. So yeah, this has been 7 questions I get asked every day about cold email outreach. Hope you enjoyed. Reach out with any more questions. I'm going to go and jump on a call. Thanks.